Good day, everyone. My name is Jeff Young, and I'm from Skills Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador. And today we have with us Megan Sams from Live Textiles. So, hi, Megan. How about you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, Kwae Jeff. Deloise and Megan, Nina Alnu. Go to Bexy, Garal, yeah, Garal Subu Ugdagam Amgug. My name is Megan. My mom is Renee Sams. My dad is Jerry Sams. I'm from the Codroy Valley here in Ugdaamgug or Newfoundland. I actually own and operate two small businesses, one being Live Textiles. That's my craft business, where I'm a weaver and a natural dyer. And the other business is called Gadalis Subu Gardens, and that's our small farm, apiary, and apothecary line. And we're here in Codroy Valley in my home community.
Wow, that's nice. Interesting. So, I guess we'll talk about the textiles. So what inspires you to create these textiles and these pieces?
So I come from a long line of craftspeople and textile people specifically. My mom's a sewer, a quilter. She used to make all of our garments. She makes a lot of blankets and quilts. And I recently came a loom from one of my ancestors came into my life recently. It's 150-year-old loom. It was handmade just down the road from where I live now, my house. So it's kind of a long thread, but I used to be a painter and a drawer, and I at some point wanted to move my creative practice into something of more function. And I'm really inspired by the ancestral work of needing functional things, but those functional things should be beautiful too. So the craft element is high. The aesthetic element is high, but I really like to have meaningful things that can be with a person in an intimate way. So in the day-to-day activities that take place in a person's home and life. So cloth is all around us all the time, and it's taken for granted. Wallpaper used to be woven, for instance, and I mean textiles in the broad sense, meaning like hide work and everything. That's all textile. And all of our blankets and our clothing, and they're around us. Cloth is around us all the time, and it's so taken for granted. So I try to make cloth that stands out, and won't be taken for granted, and will be used in an intimate fashion.
So, tell us about one piece you created that maybe has a story behind it.
Sure, I might end up telling you about two. There's one, I made a burial shroud a few years ago that was gifted to the Beothuk Institute at an AGM. I think it was the Beothuk Institute AGM. I wasn't able to be in attendance. My parents gifted the shroud on my behalf to them, and it was a burial shroud for who is referred to as the last Beothuk people, which is arguably not the last Beothuk people. And this burial shroud was woven with wool and dyed with madder root to have a red ochre color running throughout the cloth. And in the cloth, it was kind of triple layers of cloth interweaving like this to create pockets. And inside those pockets were grave goods that were often buried with a body pre-contact. So there were bits of food, there were ceremonial items, there was a small canoe, there was a small moccasin. in these pockets. And so that burial shroud was gifted to honor the deaths of Shaunadithid and Damastavid, and they and I wanted to gift that shroud to speak to the death ceremony they were given versus a death ceremony that would have been more culturally appropriate.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what would have been the second piece?
The second one, I guess I've made a few of them actually, blankets, but I love making blankets for people because they are, for me, it's a way of taking back both the gifting of or giving of blankets and the making of them. Because blankets being such a culturally in-depth piece, you know, we gift blankets, you get a blanket when you're born, sometimes you're buried in one. And having that a blanket be a pattern that is recognizable and appreciated by the people, and out of fibers that, especially if a person is laid to rest in one, are not made of plastic, for instance, is really important. And also, you know, blankets have been in a lot of Indigenous communities, they're a very meaningful gift, and that has been taken advantage of in some communities where blankets were given sort of out of context or in almost a dangerous way. So giving the blankets in a healthy, respectful way is just, it's meaningful to me, I guess. Yeah.
This is really nice. So how did you realize that you had this unique skill set?
I think so. I learned to spin yarn when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So it didn't seem out of the ordinary or that unique. I grew up next to, my godfather owns an old wool mill, and I grew up right next to it. And lots of folks around Newfoundland knit. So that didn't seem especially uniquely skillful. But I think when I was about 20, I was knitting a ton, and a family friend just gave me a loom, and I thought I had a responsibility then to learn how to use it, and I did. And I guess a few years into weaving, I really started to appreciate like the depth of textiles and how free or how easily they're taken advantage of, and we don't really recognize how they're so deeply part of our shelter system and they're around us all the time, and realized how unique it was and almost it was to be making them, but then how radical it is for people to be buying hand-woven textiles too. And people just kept asking for more and more. And I think it was around that time, maybe my mid-20s, that I realized like, oh, this isn't an everyday thing for everyone, you know? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what advice would you give to young creators?
So I'm not one for unsolicited advice, but I do have a couple things that I would share. And I think number one would be like, recognize and talk to your elders. They've lived such long and full lives, and they have so much to offer. And keeping engaged with your elders is number one. And probably number two is remembering your community and how best you can give those unique gifts and talents and skills back to the community. which directly relates to the third piece of advice I would give, which is to work your talents and gifts, because I think, especially as an Indigenous craftsperson, there are some social expectations of what kind of art or craft you should make, which I don't think is I don't think a creative person should stick to those expectations. I think when your gifts and skills and talents are clearly identified and you work toward those, that's the best way to give back to the continuum of craft, but also a community. And that is a diverse community. And I guess I offer that advice because I've received critique that my craft doesn't really seem Indigenous on its face, which I don't think is a fair critique, because anything a person makes and craft that they put their heart and soul into is going to have it's going to have their identity embedded in it. And I think it's really important for Indigenous craft people to make the work that they're drawn to make and code their culture and indigeneity into that work. And everyone will be better off for it.
Yeah, I like that response. So I guess, what are some of the challenges you faced since COVID-19 with your businesses?
That's an interesting one, because I have always lived remotely, and so I'm not sure I'm the best person to give advice or to speak to that. I actually haven't faced a lot of challenges in that regard. My textiles business, I guess a lot of the teaching that I usually do was canceled or reformatted, and so that was a large part. Every autumn I go on a teaching tour typically, and that was largely canceled. That was an adaptation. So learning to use Zoom and everything. But the sale of my textiles mostly has been through my website from the very beginning, but I really miss markets. And so a lot, and I love engaging with people and talking about craft and textiles. And so one of the things we did was, here in the Valley, we organized quarterly markets. And so they're outdoors or they're indoors in a large space with limited vendors, and we had to keep track of people who came through. But that really was not a challenge, but an exciting endeavor that came about because of COVID. Organizing and planning those markets and making sure they were done in a COVID safe fashion. It was really interesting, and we're going to continue doing them hopefully forever. So the next one will be coming up in May.
Oh, excellent. And so I guess, how could somebody find you or look at your art, or maybe purchase some of your weaving?
So I have ready to purchase pieces on my website, which is livetextiles.online. I also take commissions, and I'm open to collaborations, and I can be reached by email for those. And my email is kwe@livetextiles.online. So that's KWE@livetextiles.online. And then we also are in the process of building a studio here in the Valley, where we're going to host an artist in residence in 2022 from Okadamgug. So they'll be from Newfoundland or Labrador, and we're going to fully sponsor the artist for a month or two or whatever they need to make a body of work or do their research. And then at the end, they'll have the opportunity to go to have a show here in the Valley, but then to move it across the island and have a show at the Craft Council Gallery. So That can be, information about that can be found on my website as well. And there's a form there that they can fill out to connect back to me. So there's a lot, I'm easy to find. And I'm on Instagram at Live Textiles. And our small farm is on Facebook at Gadalasubu Gardens.
Excellent. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I look forward to checking out your Facebook page and your Instagram pages, and we'll be talking later.